What's up, guys? Welcome to the Strong Triathlete. This is Michael McElroy, and I'm going to talk about how we train for a triathlon, how we use strength training to train for a triathlon, and how you can maximize your potential in that. So, I want to start with a video series of going over why you should do strength training, how to do strength training, some specific movement that you should do for your strength training for a triathlon, and to keep it your triathlon training your priority, keep you injury free, keep you stronger, and build that base a little bit more. So first off, I want to talk about just today on why we even want to strength train in the first place. So I come from a strength training background, a CrossFit background specifically, but my background is in years of strength development. And so the first thing I assure people when I have clients come to me wanting to train for a triathlon is that we're not training for maximum strength. So I'm not going to bring you in and you tell me your goal is to do this triathlon, whether it's Olympic distance, half distance, full distance, whatever it is, that's your goal. That's the priority. So strength training should line up with that, in that we are not trying to build you to a 400-pound back squat or a 400-pound deadlift or whatever the case may be. We're trying to give you strength training so that you can maximize your endurance training, whether that's running or triathlon, whatever the case may be. We want you to be able to maximize your training. So with strength training with that purpose in mind, we want to think about a couple of things. So some of the main things that I think about are, is this movement going to negatively affect your training in the future for endurance training? So the session you have after this strength training session, is it going to be negatively impacted by the strength training you're going to do right now? So we don't want that to happen. Typically, there's some circumstances where we may not worry about that as much, but typically we want the endurance to be a good quality session. So is it going to negatively impact that? Are the movements beneficial to what you're trying to achieve? So you're trying to get faster at running, or you're trying to get faster at swimming, biking and running, or biking, whatever your endurance modality is this movement going to help that or inhibit that? And so what a lot of people misunderstand in the strength training for endurance athletes is, because your sport is an endurance sport, they want to do really low weight, really high reps. And that's not always the need for what you're trying to train for. So that can be a way to train for it. And I would say that's typically more on accessory type movements that are for small muscle groups, really trying to work on motor control, movement pattern, like scapular stability, shoulder stability for swimming, or shoulder or hip and ankle and knee stuff. But if when you're trying to actually do strength development, you want to actually go on the opposite end of the spectrum, because you're getting plenty of endurance work in your actual endurance training. You want your strength work to kind of be on the opposite end of that. So we want to teach you to use your muscles and use your nervous system to develop good force development and good power through your muscle groups. And so if we're training in that kind of high rep range, let's say 12 to like 30 reps, that's more of hypertrophy rep ranges, which is designed to put on size and to put on muscle mass, or endurance. So the 12 to kind of 18 to 20 reps is more hypertrophy. And then beyond that is endurance. And that's not what we want. So like I said, you're getting enough endurance training in your actual endurance work. And then hypertrophy, obviously, we don't necessarily want to put on size because we know that with endurance sports, especially running, you don't want to necessarily put on size because that negatively affects your running. So that, again, is where we talked about in the beginning of, is it going to negatively affect our training or our performance? So we want to shoot for maybe 8 or less reps. And that, again, depends on where you're coming from, what your background is, and et cetera. But you may want to try to shoot on lower rep ranges. Are the movements going to help us in terms of injury prevention and preventing aches and pains with our endurance training? So things I look at for that is, we don't want to get wrapped into this sport specific mindset of, is it a sport specific movement? And that kind of is similar to the rep range. You don't want to do endurance training in the gym because you're doing endurance training for your actual endurance work. We don't want to do movements that are exactly like our movement in the endurance world to be sport specific, because we're already getting enough of that. And that's where a lot of the injuries come from, is overuse in those specific movement patterns. And so instead of that, we want to actually get out of those movement patterns and getting to a more full range of motion or a lateral range of motion, but something that's not in that same exact movement pattern. So swimming, obviously, is upper body and shoulders are moving through a pretty full range of motion, but we're doing a lot of this internal rotation of the shoulders. So with swimming, we don't want to do more internal rotation work in the gym. We want to actually maybe be strengthening the external rotation, so a different position. It's also going to help open us up a little bit. With running and biking is very forward motion in the sagittal plane. And so we don't want to be moving straight forward in that same plane. If we do, we want to be going through a more full range of motion. So with running and biking, it's not through, you're not taking your hip through the full range of motion. You're not taking your knee through the full range of motion. You're not taking your ankle through the full range of motion. So that's where we get stiff and we get kind of bound down. And that's where some of our injuries come from. And it makes us more susceptible when we maybe have to do an off-road run or something like that, where we get out of that normal gait, then we're more susceptible to injury. So in our training, we want to get into a more full range of motion. So movements that help open up our hips, move us through a full range of motion in the knee and the ankle, also move in a lateral plane as well. And so we're not just staying in that straight front to back. So work on the, and that lateral plane is going to get you more working on your muscles that, without getting too technical, aren't straightforward. So the adductors, the hip, the glute, it's going to work on those a little bit more in the movement patterns that they're supposed to be taken through. So that's going to help you recover faster because you're moving through a full range of motion. It's also going to help you prevent injury a little bit. Obviously, all injuries can't be prevented, but it's going to make you more durable. So that's what we want our focus to be, is to be more durable to our training, so that we can either handle more training and recover faster, or maybe just handle the same amount of training, but recover faster and not have as much aches and pains. So big picture wise, that's what we want to do with strength training, or that's why we strength train. So that should be your priority. In the next couple of episodes, I'm going to come at you with how we lay that out in a week. And then also some specifics on what movements I like to do and what movements I like to see. And then potentially get into some specifics in how we build strength into our endurance training. And then my philosophies on endurance training. We'll just keep going from there on how I train for strong triathletes. So looking forward to getting back with you. Let me know if you have any specific questions. Reach out to me if you have any topics you want me to cover, and we'll go from there. So looking forward to chatting with you soon.